So now we're talking about APIs. I'm gonna share my screen again, and I'm just gonna go to apple.com. So I wanna go to a page where there's recommendations. Let's say you add an iPad to your cart. All the essentials and then some. These are recommendations, right? So based on what you added in your cart, these are recommendations. Now, these recommendations are not the same for everybody. This is called dynamic data. So there's two types of data. There's static and there's dynamic. Static is data that doesn't really change from user to user. On this page, everyone who goes to this page in the US will see the same prices for this product, right? Like these prices don't change. And then for everyone who comes, there's only going to be 2 options for color. And for everyone who comes to this page, there's only going to be 5 options for storage, right? So this is data that doesn't change, which means this is cacheable. So if you think about it, every time this page loads, it doesn't really make sense to fetch in the database the pricing info for this iPad and then reload it, because that's expensive. If every single person who goes to the site is like the website has to reach into the database and fetch back the data, it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
This is an example when you would want to cache. Every website at a high level has some like front end component, which is just CSS, HTML, front end. And then there's this like server or API, server/API, kind of the same thing. And then at the very bottom, you have this database, right? So we were just on the front end of the website. The front end is like the UI, it's the pages that people touch and see, and the design and the layout. But a lot of the stuff on the front end changes. Like I said, the recommendations change. If you look at estimated delivery times, if I buy a product and it sells out the second I buy it, it's not going to tell you it's the same delivery time. Like it's going to recalculate the delivery time for you, right? Sure. So a lot of the stuff that's displayed on the front end is actually changing constantly. So therefore, we have this concept of a server. So whenever the front end loads a piece of information that changes, it calls a server or an API. And what it wants, this is called a request. And basically what's happening is the front end is saying, look, we need some sort of data, so we are requesting this data, okay? And the server says, okay, we can do it. And let's use this example of, there's this delivery, right? This is calculated for every user. So this is a great example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So the front end requests data from the server, and the server says, okay, what do we need to calculate the delivery time? Well, we might need info on the number of available products, right? So like inventory, and
in your profile,
some data. So the server will say, okay, here's what we need from the database. So this is called a query.
Okay, yep.
If you ever heard of a database query, this is what this is. So the front end requests the data from the server. The server says, okay, what type of data do we need to make this request happen? So it makes a query to the database. The database sends back some sort of data to the server, and the server does some calculation. So the calculation of the delivery time happens in the server.
Okay.
Doesn't happen at the database level. So the server will say, okay, based on all of these factors, here is the estimated delivery time. And the server will then respond to the front end. So this is called a response.
Okay. Request and response.
Response. And this process of like requesting and responding is how an API works. Oh, by the way, do you know what a JSON is? JSON file format?
Nope.
Okay, so a JSON.
You know?
Do you know what a dictionary is?
JSON.
It's a way of structuring data. So let's say we're in Python, D equals this dictionary equals something, and we set that value equal to 4, right? And then if you say D, something is, but then you can also add like
You're just defining like characteristics. Yeah.
another, and then this is equal to 5, right? And then now if you print it. So it's a way of storing data and assigning a value to that data. So remember how the server sends a response back to the front end, they respond it in a JSON format. So let's look at what that actually looks like. This front end makes a request and we respond the delivery time. So if we inspect the page and we go to network and we go to XHR, which are to the AJAX calls, which that's basically just saying it's a request. We
Okay.
have this delivery request. And if we double click that, don't get what we want. So let's say I add to bag.
It's crazy, man. Okay.
Ah, here we go.
Yeah, that's it for sure.
Okay, so check this out. So this page has some sort of product, and here it has this pickup today, right? But if it wasn't available, it wouldn't say pickup today. So this is a prime example of some dynamic data that is calculated every time this page loads. So if you look at the response from the server, this is what the response looks like. Looks like one big JSON, like I said, and it says, pickup search quote or store pickup label pickup, right? So that pickup is
Put it right on there. Yeah.
what?
Filled with today.
Saying it's available today and all this data about this product. So this is one product, this is another product, this is another product, and it has all of the delivery messages for that product, right? That's what a response looks like. So that's for those 3 products that I just showed you.
Oh, cool.
This type of data that is loaded every time the page loads is uncached, meaning, well, let me start with the opposite of uncached, which is cached. So let's say we're going back to this example here, where every iPhone has the same data associated with it, the same size, the same color, the same capacity. That's cached data, meaning it doesn't need to recalculate that every time.
Yep.
So what does that look like in terms of our diagram that we drew? So let's say every time we want data, the front end calls the server and the server responds back. But now let's say there's data that we don't always need to hit the server with.
This is front end then, your UI.
So there's this caching layer, cache, where every time the front end makes a request, it first checks to see if this data is cacheable. If it's not, then it goes to the server and then the server responds back. But for data that is the same across the board, we just need to tap into this caching layer, So it's stored in this layer in between the server where it doesn't really need to do all this calculation again. If the calculation only needs to happen once, for the very first user, it'll calculate it, store it in the cache, and then for every other user, it'll just pull the number from the cache.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, dude. Yeah. Really
Okay.
does.
So that's kind of how high level an API works.